of course, a member of the House Intelligence Committee. It's good to have you as always.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, now let me not do what I just said what I was going to do. I want to just ask you one question about the process of what's going on with the shutdown. I just asked Congressman Mo Brooks, a Republican from Alabama, you guys get paid as essential employees, and it's not just irony. It angers people that you don't do your job and pass a budget, the government shuts down, and you get paid. I know it's in the Constitution as an amendment, but the word amendment means that things can be changed in that document. Do you think it's something that should be considered?
Well, if past experience tells me anything, in California, we were terrible at passing the budget on time, and then an initiative was passed that basically said that members would have their pay docked if they didn't have the budget passed by July 1st. And you know what happened after that? The budget always gets passed on time now. So money is a great incentive.
Yeah, it's something to think about. All right, breaking news. We have to deal with that in terms of what is going on in the investigation. You know that Adam Schiff has now been saying, obviously, Congressman from California, has been saying that money laundering is a big consideration. Is that your appraisal as well?
Money laundering is a huge component. The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which really requires anyone who does business with a foreign national, a foreign company, a foreign government, has to do due diligence to make sure that the money is not tainted, that it is not being laundered. And I think there is plenty of evidence to suggest that there has been money laundering going on in many of the real estate deals that were done by the Trump organization.
Just to be clear, are we talking about just old things that may have involved Paul Manafort and what he was doing before he was ever even part of this campaign? Or is there any consideration of things involving the Trump businesses?
No, specifically about the Trump businesses. You know, buying a mansion at $40 million, selling it 4 years later at $90 million. And coincidentally, in 2008, the then Donald Trump had a $50 or $40 million personal liability on a loan, and how convenient that that amount of money was made available in that transaction. But many of the hotels, I mean, if you look very specifically at all the hotel deals, whether it was in Toronto or Panama or Azerbaijan, more often than not, those deals were never intended to have the hotels open because the people associated with them weren't real estate developers of hotels. They all had interesting and oftentimes shady pasts. And all of a sudden, there's this deal done with the Trump organization, and then all of a sudden, the deal never comes to fruition.
Is it connected in any way to what you're supposed to be investigating with Russian interference?
Well, the extent to which these were Russian persons, Russian entities, Russian oligarchs, I believe it does.
And is there any indication that what you're looking at parallels what's being looked at by the special counsel?
Well, I can't speak to what the special counsel is doing, but the special counsel has a wide discretion to look at any number of things. So it could very well be part of what he's looking at.
Now, I know you can't tell me specific proof, but we also know that I like to ask questions, even though I know it goes into a realm you don't want me to. Without talking about the proof, are we just talking about questions and speculation and curiosity, or do you believe that there has been any evidence of meat on the bones of these type of allegations?
Relative to money laundering?
Yep.
Well, that's not something that we are specifically looking at, obviously. We're looking at the Russian interference in our election and whether or not there was coordination with the Trump campaign. Certainly, Special Counsel Mueller is in a position to do that.
Right.
And I think if you start tracking these various projects, you can see a connection. You can see a relationship. And as Glenn Simpson said in his testimony, which is now public, and I encourage your audience to read it, it is really kind of riveting. He said that, you know, it's a Russian mafia, unlike the Italian mafia, and everyone works for the government.
Is your sense of this issue of money laundering, Trump, and relationships with the Russians only as strong as the testimony of Glenn Simpson, Fusion GPS founder?
No, I actually think there's been a great deal of open source documentation about a lot of these deals. I mean, why is it that you have the Trump son saying, we get most of our deals from Russia? Most of our business comes from Russia. And they're buying 3, 4, 6, 12 condos in Trump properties. And they're buying them with cash. And they're buying, how does it that the Trump properties went from some 30% that were LLCs, where you don't know who the actual buyer is, to 70% of the deals being LLCs? It all doesn't add up. And I just don't want the President of the United States gaining benefit financially by being president, and some of that's going on with the Trump organization today. But retrospectively, the fact that the Russian ties to the Trump organization were so strong, and then coincidentally, you have the Russians interfering in our election, it all becomes very, very disturbing.
Very provocative questions. Do you agree with Congressman Schiff with his belief that the White House kept Steve Bannon from answering certain questions, and maybe Corey Lewandowski as well?
I don't think there's any question. And
for both gentlemen, or just for Bannon?
I think, well, certainly for Mr. Bannon, it was peculiar relative to Corey Lewandowski, who was, very upfront, said, I'm going to answer every question. And then his attorney said, well, he can't answer questions because he's not prepared to answer these questions, even though they dealt with a period of time during the campaign. So I do think that the White House is trying to pull a lot of strings with those who we are asking to come testify.
Well, it wouldn't be illegal necessarily for them to do it, but it is interesting as a tactic. Congresswoman, I appreciate you giving us this information.